Welcome, way cool people, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are in podcast form. You can pick them up at ArtistFirst.com. You can always send your questions and comments to DJ at ArtistFirst.com. And here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
The way cool people. Before we start, and I'm Michael and she's Margaret and all, a little inside baseball. Do we have 2 minutes before? Would that be good?
That would be good.
Okay. So now, see, that's inside baseball. Now some outside baseball. We're going to talk about love. Because we haven't done a show about love in like 10 minutes. So I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
And I love you.
Sweetie.
Oh, you guys hate us, don't you?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, well, we've been talking about some heavy topics, and this isn't. Well, I think this we haven't done a show about love in some time, but I think it's what makes it truly is what makes the world go round, and it's basically the root of most murders.
Oh, bye.
So, it's important stuff, because if you want to find somebody to cuddle up to or kill, either one of those things. So, but the topic that we actually been kicking this, we had this in our back pocket, because occasionally we'll say something interesting to each other, in a moment of lucidity, and we'll write it down and say we should talk about that. Like someday. And sometime back we thought, well, a phrase occurred to us which says basically that love by its very nature binds itself. And it actually turns out to be a piece of a quote from a gentleman by the name of G.K. Chesterton, who, if you can imagine John Candy in a really bad wig, that's what he kind of looks like. So, but he and John Candy are dead, and they may have loved people, who knows? But it could have been, it could have been related, because I think Candy ate himself to death. But and GK could have too, because he was on the hefty side. He was on the hefty side. But and it's an interesting phrase, because love by its very nature binds itself, and yet basically the process of loving someone is also a process of expanding boundaries. It's both a binding and also an expansion, because if you truly enter into a relationship with somebody, you have to change yourself a little bit. You have to certainly it isn't one way, it isn't your way and no other way. Otherwise it's not much of a relationship, and it wouldn't last. You have to balance.
Yeah, it becomes just an extension of one person. This relationship is almost like how to put it, almost like a decoration for me.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the other person. It's just all about me.
Yeah, and those aren't real relationships.
Right. Well, it is a sort of relationship, but not a growing one.
Right. And certainly, there are many ways to have a bad relationship. And I would say that in general, there's always more ways to do something wrong than there are to do it right.
Well, isn't that what this life is about? Learn. As long as you keep learning, because they'll always do something and it'll come out sideways.
Well, very true. I mean, experience is a very good teacher, and in fact, in most endeavors in life, you can read up all about it. You can read all the books about love, or all the books about parenting, or all the books about many, 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 many things, and then you get the rubber meets the road, so to speak, and you have to actually do it. And you will, we certainly do make mistakes, but going back to the relationships, there are many relationships which are not healthy ones, and there are many that are good, but the set of let's say good relationships is small, and I think they have certain defining characteristics, and one of them, at least in human beings, and this isn't universally true, but it's certainly generally true. Is there's a degree of exclusivity to a relationship. You're my friend, and I'm your friend. And if you're really my best friend, there's a degree of exclusivity there. We like that. We like being considered somebody's best friend, their confidant. We like to have somebody who we think is our best friend, and there's a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy in relationships. There are people with whom you have your most intimate relationships. Then there's a second level down, and lower and lower and lower. You have your acquaintances and people you just say hi to, and neighbors and friends. I mean, it's all those are relationships, and they're all probably generally civil. But given similar circumstances, because there are always situational relationships, like we're all stuck in an elevator and all of a sudden everyone gets really friendly or really unfriendly. But in given a particular situation or a particular set of circumstances, there were people with whom you feel empowered to share an intimate thought, or you're empowered to share an intimate touch or whatever. You certainly don't walk up to every stranger and give them a hug. But of course, if you have a relationship with that person, you may do that on a particular occasion. Similarly, you can't share all your most intimate thoughts with everybody on the beach, because then they just lock you up. But so there's human relationships have a hierarchy and an exclusivity. The closer you are with someone in a relationship, the more exclusive you want it to be. You don't necessarily want somebody to have the same intimacy of relationship at the highest levels that they do with you. You want to say, I am your most significant other, and we codify that. We codify it with marriage and with bonds and with vows and with all kinds of things, and many times the breaking of those relationships is extremely significant, again, inversely based on the degree of intimacy. The more intimate a relationship is, the more it hurts when it breaks, whether that person dies or there's a breakdown in the relationship. So there's a degree of binding. Exclusivity is also a binding. I'm bound to this person through these ties and bonds of experience, of exclusivity, of a vow. You say, I will take you for better or worse, for richer or poorer. It's a vow. It's a binding.
Oh, ideally, it would be an expression of your soul to a soul. Therefore, you have that, what most people in modern society now are looking for is their soul mate. But it's words that are trying to describe that soul to soul at a heart level, at a core level, a resonance from one to the other. The exclusivity aspect of it is an outside looking in kind of viewpoint. When you're internal, that resonance only happens when you are hitting that frequency. And not everybody can hit that frequency with every other person. Not always, anyway. And the idea is to be able to go deeply in and hit that core resonance, one to the other. That's where the intimacy makes itself known. And we all yearn for that expansion of our hearts, because in that resonance you realize that you are seen, and it's not just all the good parts that you may happen to have. You are accepted as you are. It is that point of unconditional love that resonates from one to the other, and it is a marvelous thing when that happens. And you can see examples of that, with a mother and a child, or a father and a child. Just the unconditional love that can exist that is the most easily recognizable and evident.
It's interesting because there's a couple. Of course, whenever you make these statements, there's 15 really good points, but there's a couple of really good ones there. The relationship of child to parent has several specific intimacies. There's the intimacy of biology. Okay.
Right.
Although certainly you can feel the bond of parenthood with somebody who's not your biological offspring. But there's generally, again, let's just speak in generalities. There's generally the bond of biology. There's also the bond of dependence between, when a child is born, they're completely dependent or nearly completely dependent on someone to nurture and care for them, and over time there's almost immediately there's an intimate bond, but there's a shared level of experience. But this is very important to our overall theme here. When you have a child, okay, first of all, your life is over and it's ruined. But secondly, you have to make room for them. Relationships are very interesting things because you have relationships which are more peer-to-peer relationships, and you have relationships which are more that are not peer-to-peer relationships. They're more of dependent relationships. Yet, in both types, you have to make room for the person, because this is not an identity. It isn't an I or a me relationship, unless you're having a relationship with yourself in the mirror, which people do. But in the parent-child relationship, you really have to make room. There's a bond there, a binding of responsibility for another's well-being, for their life, and that's a level of intimacy, body intimacy, biological intimacy, and then there's a generational intimacy, in the sense that we know as biological entities incarnate here that we don't last forever, and then these new people, these persons from whom they come from us or come from our relationships, are going to carry on into the future. So there's a heritage, there's a biological connection, and there's a generational connection, and these relationships require you to make room for them. There's physically making room for a child. The mother makes room for a child inside her body, which is, I can't speak to it, but I think it's an experience.
Yeah. 9 months experience.
It's a horrible, wonderful experience that has some growing parasite inside. No, I'm sure it's this beautiful child inside your body. Oh my God, I'm just moving around. So, but then they come out, and that's just awful. I mean, wonderful, and then they're there, but then you have to make room for them, and all of us, there's a generational. There's sort of a chain of, you were born, you were dependent, someone took care of you in general, and then you do the same for that next generation. There's a chain going back to our earliest, to 10,000 generations back, a chain of humanity, which you're honoring in having the next link in the chain, however heavy and dependent and horrible they are. But and then they do the same for the next generation. It's just a wonderful thing. And
are you depressing yourself?
No, I'm good. I'm really good. And then but you have to make room. You have to make room for that next generation. And even in societies, when you see generational change, there's always a tension, but there's a relationship and a room making for the next group of people to come into their adulthood and to take on the roles in the society. But I think we're going a little far afield. The intimate relationship of parent to child is a dependent relationship. You really have to make room, and yet the other part of this, the way you also make room, besides this initial dependence, is that you make room for them to become less dependent over time, to become more and more independent. Because, go ahead, Neil.
Well, just that relationship must mature. You are, in essence, training them so that they can go on without you.
Yes.
And it's an understanding, because you are the older, that you realize there's a whole cycle to this. And the little ones that first come in, that's not even on the scope. That there's beginnings and endings. Everything just is. It is. I'm hungry. Feed me now.
Yeah.
But that is the way of human development. And as you get older and become more responsible, especially for another, it shifts your viewpoint tremendously.
Expands it.
Yes, you must expand your viewpoint if you are to be able to take care of this little life. When it comes to adult relationships where it's more peer-to-peer, it's a whole different set. You're not looking at it in terms of I need to be caring for you bodily. You can eat yourself. You can eat by yourself, and you can take care of yourself.
But you're right. You're right. But I think over the course of a relationship, one of the reasons you make these relationships, the resonance, is that you pledge your whole self to the other in exchange for their whole self. And as you mentioned, it comes with potentially great burdens. But you accept those things. You make room for that person. You make room for infirmity. You make room for changes in each other over the time. Most people will have a relationship when they're younger, but as that relationship matures, that person changes, you change, circumstances change. You get richer, you get poorer, you get older, you get fatter. But the core of the resonance, the purity of the relationship, isn't based on these physical things. Yet, the changes in each one of us over time, over the course of a life, will require the other, the intimate other, the exclusive other that's in this type of relationship to accommodate. And it's a two-way street. You accommodate each other. Relationships are not 100% identical people coming together that always do 100% of the same things. They're people who find a resonance that complements as well as enhances. And people say, well, I'm a half and a half makes a whole. No. We've said it in the past. It's 1 + 1 makes infinity. It isn't a relationship of fragments that make a whole. It's really a relationship of wholes that make something greater than the two, even the sum of the two combined.
Well, it's not an additive function. It's a multiplicative, if not exponential. But let's put that aside for a sec.
No, but that's right. That's absolutely right.
But when you are first entering into a relationship with another person, and it's a one-to-one, peer-to-peer kind of thing, you realize at that point what it is that you each need to make space for the other. And that's usually the whole, with getting to know you and, oh, you like this or you don't like that kind of thing. What can we do together? Can we go to a concert together? Can we listen to the same music? It goes down that road initially. And what you're really looking for is not just this list of qualifications that you're checking off, oh, we like this, we eat this, we wear this, our favorite color is this. some people form these check boxes. Say, it's got to be this way. I can never get involved with someone who doesn't do this. And hopefully in that initial touch where you're getting to know each other, the heart resonance will start. What's at the core of it all is whether or not you can actually communicate one to the other. These outward touches are things that you may begin to talk about, but in that sharing of what it is, you begin to build a vocabulary between the two of you to understand each other. You're able to communicate one to the other, and that is experiential. As you get more and more under your belt, your vocabulary builds tremendously, and that it's in and of itself is one of your major tools for the maintenance of the relationship. And it's not all verbal, by the way, ladies, because a lot of people think you got to keep talking at people. It's like, no. When I say vocabulary, it's not just words.
Grunts count? Grunts?
Oh my!
But this is a very. I like this point entirely, because oftentimes relationships have a superficial beginning, or at least not superficial, but you meet somebody, and the circumstances may be whatever. You may meet as we did at school, or you may meet at the job, or wherever you meet them, and people have often described this. There's initial sort of spark. Call it a spark. There's an initial resonance. There's an interest. It can be initially attraction, but true relationships aren't based on physical attraction. You are initially physically attracted to somebody. There are these sort of superficial criteria that everyone sort of has in the back of their head, but oftentimes they're not false, but they're just not enough to build a true relationship. They're call them, let's say, parameters, or sort of an idea of sort of an idealized idea of whom I would like to have a relationship with. But the foundational point that you made is it is based on communication, and the communication isn't, as you said, verbal. It's much more along the lines of, does this person's way of hearing me and my way of hearing them become more than in other words, when you communicate with somebody, you're not just talking at them or waiting for their lips to stop flapping so that you can talk. You're exchanging energy, information, ideas, and as you do that with resonance, an important feature of resonance is that it grows. Resonance is a sound which finds it a harmony or harmonic in the object of which it's starting to interact with, and then the amplitude grows. These are just technical phrases, but when you meet somebody with whom you have a bit of a spark, you find that the communication becomes easier, different, greater. You say, I think this, and they say, oh yeah, and I like, and then this, and then there's a trading back and forth which starts to grow, much like a spark grows into a fire, or becomes a greater flame. The resonance starts out small, sometimes just a little bit, but as you really start to have true resonance, it often grows and builds and becomes symphonic. It gets overtones. It gets,
levels.
There are levels. There are arias. There are waves.
Well, it can begin to develop into a song of its own, and that's what you want, because each relationship between two unique people forms a very unique song. And you have ups and downs. That's part of it. But I think the term that I've heard the kids use is, you get me.
Yes.
And that means that person, that's where the communication goes beyond what words were said. It is at the core the emotion or the concept that you were in, and the other person sees it and acknowledges it. You get me?
That's also very important, because getting you, it means that you've gotten beyond the words. You are not your words. You are not your actions. You are well beyond that, or you encompass all those things. You're not your appearance. You're not the amount of money you have or the car you drive. All these things are peace. But when you get me, you're seeing me at a heart level, the real me, below all the other nonsense, or beyond all the other nonsense. And when both of you get each other, there's an automatic intimacy. It's like no one else gets me the way you get me. So the resonance can be described that way. It becomes an exclusivity, because I can see this one and this one and this one and this one. Oh yeah, hi. Oh yeah, we can talk. We can share. I can tell you about my day. You can tell me about your day, and we're talking about superficial banalities that anybody can talk about. But it's a completely different exchange, encased in the same, at least from the outside, the same actions and words.
Right. And I think of what it brings to mind is, you know how in the Bible they talk about the setup for where you were supposed to put the Ark of the Covenant. It's supposed to be the house of God. And there's 3 sections to it. You have the outer court, you have the inner court, and then you have the Holy of Holies.
Yes.
And the idea is that's a microcosm of who you are. The outer court is having to do with the outside world. When to step into the inner court is where you begin to understand each other and how you are supposed to interact, because it's becoming a more sacred ground. But when you get into the Holy of Holies, very, very few people are allowed in. Very few. And it is a very intimate and powerful place. So when someone is able to open their heart up to that point where you are allowing a person in, that touch allows not just a soul contact, but that's a spirit contact. If you want to look at it this way, the outer court is body, the inner court is soul, and the Holy of Holies is spirit.
And eternal.
Yes.
You know, the body and the soul are instances, and in some ways ephemeral. The body is certainly ephemeral.
The body's ephemeral, but the soul carries through.
Right. It has a individuality, but the spirit is beyond those things. And interestingly enough, at the spirit level, you can under the right circumstances be intimate with any other human being who has spirit. You transcend yourself, your individuality, your I-ness. You become one with the infinite. You go into the eternity bank and all the things that we've talked about in the past. But when you find somebody with whom you can augment your eternity experience, with whom you are now going, you're having a relationship which will last beyond both of your deaths, and your individuality even. It's beyond that. This is certainly a expansion, and it's you've broken down all the boundaries at that level, and you've become far more than your individual souls, or certainly your individual bodies, as far as the relationship's scope. But this is few. This is very, very, as you said, very, very powerful places, very, very exclusive places at the same time.
And really, just to be aware that it is a sacred place.
Mm.
Okay, people just, we can all go here and do whatever. But when it comes to recognizing that there's a part of you that is sacred and must be acknowledged in its sacredness by another in that kind of relationship.
Well, and on that moment, take a moment, think about your sacredness. We're going to go back to the studio, and we'll come back. We'll talk a little bit more about love.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lyons is book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
The Timeless Esoterica radio program with Dr. Bruce is broadcast on the fourth Monday of every month at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern on ArtistFirst.com. We explore topics including the paranormal, alien life, mysteries, conspiracies, hidden history, oddities, and much more. Each show will feature a special guest with exciting and thought-provoking discussion. Always keep an open mind, an open heart, live forever, and remember Dr. Bruce believes in you.
The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
You are listening to The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, Z-Man. And tonight we are talking about one of our favorite topics, love. Yeah, well, actually, I think we're really talking more about, you know, the container for love, which is really the relationship. Love is something which you can express, but it has to have. I believe it has to have a vehicle, unless it's unconditional love, unless it's love which is pure, completely pure, and really is unattainable in the physical, unattainable in the world of everyday experience. But the conversation we're having really is about the fact that love and the relationship that carries it has both the requisite need to bind, which is to make ties, make covenants, make sort of an exclusivity, as well as to expand and really change. If you think of, and it's just in general, everyone, if you think of the relationships you have with people, there's a hierarchy. We'd mentioned that last half hour. And to the degree that you have an intimate relationship with somebody, whomever it is, it becomes more and more, you mentioned it's sacred, the Holy of Holies, it becomes more and more exclusive. You don't have the same relationship with your, certainly with let's say your mother, than you do with any other woman. You're even very closely related. Your mom may have a sister, your aunt. Your aunt and your mom are not, they may be genetically almost identical. They have the same parents. They may look almost exactly the same. Your mom may have a twin, but one of them's your mom, you know, and the other one's not. So you can have an identical twin person to your mom, your Aunt Jane or whatever, and your mom you can tell and talk and have a relationship with that you would never share with Aunt Jane, and that were your mom to pass on, it wouldn't be like you just, well, oh, you know, let's just clone her and then we'll have mom again. No, even the identical clone, whether it's a natural twin or some, you know, science fiction thing, is not your mom. The relationship with your parent is very exclusive. There's a bond there. It comes from experience. It comes from, you know, there's a genetic relationship, but that's not enough. You know, that show, I'm reminded of the show that we would watch. It's basically where people are reunited with their families after being adopted and being separated. And there is a bond when these people are reunited after sometimes decades, many decades, with a family member whom they've never met before. There's an instantaneous bond. It's something which is amazing to witness, but yet it's so human. There's an instantaneous intimacy and exclusivity because this is my parent. It's not.
Yeah, no. This is my blood. The adoptee always talks about wanting to be able to look at the people around him or her and see something familiar. You know, a skin color or a quality, a certain eye shape or a nose or a height or a liking for certain things. A familiarity, and not having that, not saying that they're not loved. They are loved. But they're looking for, as a part of them that's looking for something similar to be reflected back. And when they meet their mother for the first time, especially their mother, but other relatives, whether it be a brother or a sister, the response is immediate. There's a part of them that just breaks down into tears, and arms reach out, and just this touching of, this is the face of the person who bore me.
Mm.
It's unspoken, but it is something that you see over and over again whenever the reunions happen.
Mm.
And it's truly amazing because it hits at a core level.
So, and that's interesting because there it is. There's the exact example of a bond, which is it was not it certainly was initially physical, but these people have been separated for sometimes decades. They haven't had physical contact in a very, very long period of time, but yet the bond never leaves. Oftentimes, the stories are given very often that, oh, we always thought of you. You know, we knew you were out there somewhere. This is the people who were adopted out there. Or, you know, I always wondered. I always thought, am I looking up at the same, whatever, the moon, and thinking, are they looking at the same moon too? But that is
yearning. That yearning.
Exactly, the yearning. And so there's an exclusivity and there's a bond at that level. And then the similar bond, once you form a relationship with another, the exclusivity, the sacredness of it, we codify it with all kinds of things, ceremonies, vows, bonds, rings, all these other things. But the exclusivity and the sacredness is just, we're putting these things around it to market to others, but you already have it at the intimate level. You know, it's invisible and doesn't have words for the relationship. And then once you have that, you enter into this, call it the Holy of Holies place, the sacred place. It transcends their death, your death, anything which happens to you, each of you in life, you know, sickness, health, infirmity, all these other things, because you've touched down into the eternal. It is truly the bond of parent to child, or certainly mother to child, is at the level of incarnation, and the bond of relationship between, let's say, husband and wife is at the level of creation. You know, they're both in eternal events where spirit and soul and body meet, and these become extracorporeal as well as beyond time. Beyond the bonds of corporeal existence, these relationships continue. And we see that we touch into the infinite, and that's what makes that resonance so incredibly important. It opens those doors.
Right. It's more, what I would say, just using the analogy that we had before, the relationship itself, that love, is the very spirit of love.
Mm.
Okay, so to enter into the Holy of Holies, you must engage in that spirit of love.
Mm.
Okay, and that is a singular kind of thing when you're touching into it. There is a reason why in the Holy of Holies only one person was allowed in.
Mm. Yes.
Okay, and that is because you're going past all boundaries of who you are. That person represents that whole group and interconnected, but it has to do with that love that is life itself.
Mm.
So it's understanding that at your very core is what you really are searching for, the touch into the sacred that is beyond words, that is the very basis of life and love itself. And we have outward forms, a myriad of outward forms that you have in the inner court where your family is. And it manifests, love manifests itself in multiple relationships, whether it is parent to child or child to parent, whether it is husband to wife, wife to husband, whether it is an unconditional love where someone has been in service all their lives, taking care of other people that they may not even know, but they do everything out of their heart. It's it's something that we as human beings yearn for. We yearn for the ability to touch into that and be understood by that.
Yeah.
As well as express our part in that love relationship.
You touched on the core of it. We yearn to return or to reconnect to that eternal part of ourselves. It's also the basis of a true relationship with spirit. But the relationship person to person, at its most intimate level, everything goes back to spirit, because it just does. We all start there in eternity. We have and we've talked about this sort of dipping into the corporeal, of incarnating, of encapsulating in an individual soul. But these things that we go through here, and the relationships and resonances that we go through here, once they reach that level, they're back. You go back to spirit. You don't have to go back to spirit through, becoming discorporate again. You can touch back into spirit through that remarkable intimate relationship, the reaching of the sacredness of recreation, of intimacy beyond, again, one to one, self to self. You are an eternal being, but in intimately interacting with another, you get the extra vision to see that eternity again through their eyes, and to have your eyes witness theirs. It's the function. Part of the relationship is the function of the witness, but it's such an intimate witness that it becomes an eternal witness. It becomes a changing of spirit or a learning of spirit that is unique and necessary. As we've talked about it before, it becomes part of that eternity bank. Part of the experience is, if you have that level of intimate relationship, it changes spirit at a fundamental level, a necessary level, which you bring back. It's an important, in fact, essential step of incarnation to reach intimacy with at least one other at that eternal level. That's why we're all looking for it. You may not get there every time, but it's why we're all looking for it.
Well, it is part of who we are to be able to express what is at our heart. And, most of the time when people are beginning their journey, trying to find out what they're going to do with their lives, most people go into, what matters most and what talents do I have, and they try to go down that road. But when you go to the core of who you are, you begin to realize what it is that sets your heart into that resonance, that joy. There's a I guess Campbell's word is best. There's a bliss that happens when you are able to express what is deep inside of you. And that is what we are all looking to be able to do. And it's always trial by error when you're living. You may be going after a certain career, and it had to do with trying to get money, and you realize, well, money wasn't everything. You tried something else. Maybe it's a relationship, and aren't I supposed to have the ideal relationship with a list? The 2.5 kids and a house and a dog and whatever. And that didn't work. You're feeling a flatness in your heart, or your soul. There's nothing growing necessarily, just there's empty. There can be this state of emptiness. And it's realizing that there is a part of you that needs to be heard. Because the mind will tell you that, oh, I know how to do this. I know how we're going to be able to fulfill this part. And it gives you this game plan. and when you're young, you're like, yeah, okay, let's do that.
Right.
And you follow it for a while and you realize, I don't think this is working. And you have to have the courage enough to say, you know what? This really isn't working. I need to reevaluate. And you have to watch, because a lot of people's pride starts presenting itself, their personality and their pride. And they say, oh no, we have the plan. We should be able to do it this way. We have to just do it harder or longer or broader.
Right.
You know, change something. We must be doing something wrong. And it's like, no, because the core being state is really where your compass is. It tells you whether or not your feet are walking on a productive path.
The heart.
And the productive path doesn't mean that it's always going to be good, by the way. It just means that you're learning.
Well, the good is a very interesting thing, because there's the good that the head tells you is good, and then there's you mentioned it, the bliss, but there's the true heart, the true resonance will take you to the slums of Calcutta for your whole life, but yet that was the path that gave you bliss. You may end up in the eyes of the world dying on a cross, which doesn't look like a fun thing to do at all. But yet, you may end up in the eyes of the world not being famous or or successful or any of the metrics of the world. Yet, if your heart sees true, and you have, let's say, you find somebody with whom you can have a heart-true relationship, you have succeeded beyond most people's wildest dreams, and no one has to know ever. The most amazing thing about the Holy of Holies is that you never have to tell another soul, because it doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
The things of true value, the heart things, are so intimate that only the other whom is with you, knowing that they know and that you know that they know, which is complicated but true, just work it out, is enough. In fact, it's more than sufficient. It's eternal. And if no one else knows, ever, that you never tell another soul, it doesn't matter a bit. And that's an anathema to the brain, to the mind, and an anathema to what, well, you're not doing it right. Well, yeah, I don't care. Because when you are, if there is such a thing as doing it right, it no longer matters what anybody who's in the outer court or in the inner court matters. It only matters about you and the other in that sacred place.
You and the core of love, the spirit that is. It is an intimate relationship with a loving presence that is eternal. And once you're there, everything changes.
Your own imminent physical demise matters not a bit.
Yep.
Not It's not even a consideration anymore, because you have exceeded the bounds of corporality. Is that a word? Let's say it is. But you've exceeded the bounds of your corporeal existence, and it doesn't matter. You've exceeded the bounds of a soul existence, and it doesn't matter. And you've reached a being state which is as close to eternal as an individual anything can realize, and you no longer, the singularity of that point, that duality singularity of that point, doesn't negate anybody else's. It's so exclusive that nothing else can touch it, nor it lacks nothing. It is complete, and in the completeness it is unique, and it's not like you're taking it from anyone else. Everyone can have this.
Yes.
But no one else needs to, except the relationship at that intimate level.
Those that are willing, you must give assent to this.
Yes, you meant to expand, to hold, to allow.
Because in order to enter into that state, you must let go of many things. And a lot of people are awfully attached to many things.
You reach the insight of the Buddha, because the attachment he was talking about, that he gave all the examples, and he goes, I have to give up this, and I have to give up that, and no more smoothies, and I have to do that, and I'm the vegan. No, you see, these are all practice things. The Holy of Holies is a release from all attachment, and a being state which is touching into the eternal. And you are already there. You're at nirvana, but it doesn't matter. You don't have to tell anybody, nor does anyone need to know. And that's an attachment too. The attachment of someone else needs to know about this. No, they don't.
That's an illusion of addiction to people's opinions. And that's something that we can wish or bless other people with. May you be free from the addiction of other people's opinions.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that when you are in, when you have reached the true Holy of Holies, even the bonds of love, the bindings and the boundaries and the expansion also don't matter. But they're important to get there. All these steps are very important to get there. And when you're there, they aren't important anymore, but you do need them. So, bind yourself in love and, seek the intimacy.
And I believe we've reached the end
of
our hour. So I'm Margaret.
And I'm Michael.
And thank you for listening.